Hey everyone, my name is Gretchen Roe, and it's my very great pleasure to welcome you this afternoon to a conversation about homeschooling math in high school. By way of introduction, I am the homeschooling parent of six, five of whom are now graduated college, and the caboose in our train is a junior in high school. We've done everything in our family from homeschool to private school to parochial school to public school. And my husband and I have always taken the philosophy that we do for each child what is best for them. Four of my children were homeschooled all the way through high school. My fifth one was homeschooled until his sophomore year of high school, and then he elected to go to public school. And our youngest is a junior this year in a very small public high school here in North Carolina. Since 2014, I have been a placement consultant for Demme Learning. And I work extensively with families in the placement process. And then just as of December this past year, I became our community outreach coordinator. So I'm delighted to have the opportunity to have a conversation with you all today. I have lots of things to share, and I really would like to have the opportunity to share with you a PowerPoint, only because I think it helps keep me on track. There will be some elements in this PowerPoint that you will find that are beneficial for you. At one point, I'm going to give you a URL. I'm going to suggest you pick up your phone and take that URL and take a screenshot of it so that you can access it. But we have lots of things to talk about today, so let's get started. Homeschooling math in high school. How do you teach a mathematics you don't remember? I have lots of things to share with you today, and I want to begin with an agenda because I think it's always helpful to know where we are headed. As I've always told my teenagers, failure to hit the target is never the fault of the target. The first thing I want you to consider is, what were your mathematical experiences in high school? I became a homeschool parent overnight in the middle of a calendar year. I had no intention of homeschooling. But my third grade daughter was told back in 1995 that there was no need for her to memorize her multiplication tables. And I knew that that was bad information at the least and criminal at the worst. And so I intended to homeschool her through the end of her third grade year. That semester experience launched us into a 21-year joyful journey, and I hope you find that to be the same. If you, like me, are a hesitant mathematician, then I have lots of encouraging information for you today. And if you are not like me, if you are the mathematician's mathematician and you loved math, I have some words of wisdom for you as well, too. I've worked with well over 1,000 families in the last 8 years here at Demme Learning. And I've learned from each one of them. And so today I'm going to share a little bit of that with you for your benefit. My next question to you in the agenda is, where are you beginning this journey? Have you always been a homeschool family? Is math tears at your kitchen table? If it is, I recommend that you pick up the phone and give Demme Learning a call before you launch into a high school endeavor. There may be things that we can suggest to you that would make it more advantageous for your family's experience. If you have always homeschooled and you've changed curriculum every year, there may be some gaps that need filling. If you're choosing to homeschool at high school and you have not homeschooled before, you may not even know if there are gaps in your child's academic experience. In all those situations, the placement specialists at Demme Learning stand ready to help you. We have enjoyed our collaboration with Sunlight, and we are always here and available for you. We will help you choose the right curriculum. We want you to get it right the first time, and then we'll return you to Sunlight for your purchase. I think it's important also to talk about making a plan and what happens if you don't. So that is my bullet point number 3. And then we're going to talk a little bit about goal setting. And then we're going to talk last of all about how Math UC can help you achieve your goals. And that really shouldn't be a bullet point because it's woven through the entirety of the presentation here. But I have lots of things to talk to you about. So let's get started in earnest. First of all, what makes Math UC unique? Math UC is a K4, K5 through calculus homeschool experience. We offer kindergarten through 12th grade. We are manipulatives based. We use manipulatives to instruct from that first experience, which we call primer, all the way through algebra 1. Once you're in high school math, most of that math becomes the theoretical mathematical adventure. So manipulatives can't help us illustrate that. But Math UC uses those manipulatives as a foundation. Now, you may be coming to us as a high school parent and say, well, if I haven't used Math UC from the beginning, then I guess I can't use it. And that's not true at all. I've been homeschooling 6 years when I found my way to Math UC, and my 2 eldest children, I was very grateful that when they hit their high school years, they had a co-op that they could participate in. And then my 3rd child came along and she was out of sequence for the co-op. So that meant I was going to have to do high school math with her. And we spent a semester in tears with 2 different mathematics programs before we found our way to Math UC. Homeschoolers network better than anybody. And I had a homeschool friend who literally brought Math UC to my house, set it on my kitchen table and said, this is what you will use. So my first exposure to Math UC was at pre-algebra. And in fact, I had not used the Greek series with my children until my 4th and 5th child. My only regret is I wish I'd found my way there sooner. Math would have been a more pleasurable experience in our household. We also say that we're conceptually based. What does that mean? Well, concepts and methods are 2 sides of the same coin. So if you know how to do something, but you don't know why you're doing something, if you forget how, then you're out of luck. But if you know why you're doing something, even if you forget how, you can make your way through to a successful conclusion. So conceptual understanding is enormous in mathematical success. We are a mastery focused program. And so I think it's important to explain the difference between an incremental or a spiral program and a mastery program. In an incremental program, somebody predetermines how often you get to see a particular mathematical concept. And if they have chosen in advance that you would see that particular concept 3 times, and then that concept falls out of rotation before you have a complete understanding, then your understanding remains incomplete forevermore. In a mastery-focused program, you learn mathematics 1 concept at a time. Math, by its very nature, is sequential and cumulative. So in a mastery-focused program, a student can demonstrate their understanding and then move forward. The other advantage to a mastery-focused program is you don't need to spend time on what you already know. If your student can demonstrate that understanding, then you get to move forward and learn something new. And that's an enormous change from an incremental program where someone has predetermined the number of problems you need to complete before you can be considered successful. We also place a significant amount of emphasis on fundamental skills. Very often when we have conversations about high school math, particularly if parents tell us that high school math is a struggle, we find that there's a weak fundamental skill set. Having those fundamental skills is like driving a car with well-inflated tires. If your tires are low, the journey is uncomfortable and long. And we want a student to be successful. So we do place an emphasis on fundamental skills. And I will tell you as well, we've had an enormous amount of success with kids who are lacking a fundamental skill set, and they become a Math UC family, and we give them that set, and then they are mathematically successful. So if any of what I've just said rings true, let me encourage you to explore a little bit further into Math UC's interventions before you begin your high school experience. The last thing that's important to emphasize is parental engagement. And we believe that the best math experience is a conversation between parent and student. Now, as I say this, I recognize that here in the US, we have been fed the myth that anything digital is a better experience than what we can provide across our kitchen table. And that's simply not the truth. We believe that there is a significant amount of merit in completing mathematics with paper and pencil. And there is plenty of evidentiary research to support that. When you work in a digital world, your brain can't ascertain the difference between the A on your keyboard and the K on your keyboard. It's all the same amount of neurological input. When you bring a paper and a pencil to the table and you walk through the steps of a mathematical problem, you are bringing more than one sense to the table, and that in and of itself is a superior academic experience. The next thing I'd like to talk about is, can we be self-directed? Can we create self-directed learners? I get this question from parents all the time. They'll say to me, I have an 8-year-old that I can't leave alone for 2 minutes to do a math problem. And that's probably very much the truth. Mathematics is a language, and we don't learn language in a vacuum. It has to be a conversation in order to have complete understanding. I have to tell you, with my 6 kids, every one of them became self-directed at a different age. And I, until my last child, really believed that there was no self-direction until you had some prefrontal cortex development. My youngest child proved to me that you could take off and be fully self-directed by about 5th grade. But I had to go through 5 of his siblings before I got there. Every child is different, and it's up to us to meet our child's needs at that moment. So anticipating that a child will guide their own mathematical journey before they're really ready is not logical thinking. The advantage to a Math UC experience is when you use that multi-modality approach, when you can bring as many senses to the table as possible, when you focus on a singular concept at a time, when you engage properly with a Math UC experience of what we call the teach back, where your student has to explain to you the concept they have learned, all of that bleeds over into everything they do academically, and they learn how to become self-directed. They learn how to advocate for themselves, and isn't that what we really want? All of us as parents want to see our kids become independent learners, and Math UC is a terrific tool to help you toward doing that. So I often ask this of parents that I have helped through the placement process. And I have to tell you, very often, the answer on the other end of the phone or the other end of the computer or the other end of the conversation is crickets. Because we don't think about what our goals are for our student. And from about middle school forward, I want to submit to you that you should be having a conversation with your child about what they want to do after high school. I recognize that change is inevitable and it's a constant. And what your child wants to do today may not be what they want to do tomorrow. But I think we have a mandate as parents to keep all the possible doors open for those growing minds so that they don't have limited choices as adults. And part of that is setting some goals along the way for high school. You know, I have a colleague who says it's always easier to steer a moving ship. So think about that as you get ready and prepare for high school. Have a conversation with your student. What do you think your mathematical goals are? And bear in mind that keeping those doors open will be tremendously helpful. I've mentioned foundational skill sets, and I want to address this just one more time because very often in the placement process, the placement specialists at Math UC see this as a problem. We have a student who comes to us who has struggled at Algebra 1. Sometimes they've struggled with Algebra 1 in more than one curriculum. And they come to us and the parent says, I think I have a child with a math disability. We have a variety of diagnostics available to us that help us understand if that is a legitimate concern, or if simply there are gaps in their instruction that occurred earlier in their mathematical learning that are impeding them from being successful now. Let me give you an example so you'll understand. Very often when a Algebra 1 student struggles, their struggle is not with the Algebra 1 content, it's with the fact that they are weak in the foundational skill set of understanding how to add, subtract, multiply, or divide fractions. If your student is weak in fractions, it doesn't matter whose Algebra 1 program you're going to use, they're going to struggle. So we encourage you in the process of diagnostics and placement to figure out if your child has a solid foundational skill set. And if something's lacking, there's no harm and no foul in taking a pause to make sure that we have given students the absolute best foundation possible to be successful. Why is upper level mathematics different from what we have done to this point in time? Well, if you're like me, I was the mathematical parent who had a million kids, 10,000 irons in the fire. And so my children would bring their math to me to correct, and I would look at it and I would say, all right, you got this many right, you got this many wrong. That's an 80%. I'll consider that good. Let's move on. I want to encourage you to change your thinking about that now at the high school level, because the thinking skills need to be different. Up to this point in time, your child has engaged in computational math. In other words, they are computing something. It might be multiple steps, but it's still a computation. When they move into pre-algebra and algebra 1, they now have to learn to think logically and strategically. And not every math problem, even though it might present the same way, will be solved the same way. So they need to bring their thinking skills to the table and begin the plan of what is the best course of action for me to solve this particular problem. Mastery also means something different in upper level math. So I want you to encourage you to utilize the lessons. If you've used a mastery-based program, you know that when your student demonstrates understanding, you can move on. And that may mean that you haven't used all of the problems in the lesson. But there is a muscle memory that needs to be created with high school math. And I would encourage you not to skip pages and not to skip exercises in high school level math. The reason is because we are exercising that logical thinking muscle, and we're learning to make that strong and appropriate for every math problem that we are presented. It's a skill that needs to be honed, just like mathematics is a conversation that needs to go back and forth between two people to become profitable. Practice is also profitable with high school math. I also want to say something about calculator skills, because many of you, particularly if you have children who are coming out of a public school environment, may have had a student who's been handed a calculator from the get-go, or they've been handed their phone. Calculators are valuable, but if you're going to go in with a desire for a college experience, at some point in time, your student's going to have to take some sort of standardized testing. And the SAT is designed to have portions that are calculator free. So if your student is calculator dependent, they don't keep their computational skills sharp. So yes, there are problems where using a calculator is definitely to their advantage. But if using a calculator is a habit, particularly for foundational mathematics computations, I would encourage you to pull back from that now, so that when they get to standardized testing, they're not disadvantaged. Here's another one, particularly for mothers of boys. I have 3, so I get this. Showing their work will now be critical. Everything they're going to do is multiple steps. And the greatest value in any math lesson is not in the problems they get right. It's in what they get wrong and how they walk back through what is wrong to know that it is indeed correct. So they've got to be able to show their work, and that's a critical skill. My 5th child has a degree in computer science, and he took math every semester of college. He looks just like me, but we have different desires and loves as far as academics are concerned. And in one of his classes, every math problem that he had was 5 to 6 pages of work. If he hadn't shown his work, he would never have known where he had gone wrong. So I would encourage you to start fighting the good fight. Yeah, most kids in 2nd, 3rd, 4th, maybe even 4th grade can keep the work in their head. But by the time you get to multiple digit multiplication and definitely long division, you're not going to be able to hold it in your head and still be accurate. So that's a good skill to instill from the get-go. And if you haven't, it's time to have that logical conversation about why it's a necessary skill to cultivate. Last but not least, you should expect high school math to take longer. And the reason that I say that is, and by longer, let me clarify what I mean. Not necessarily longer in any given lesson, but longer in the length of time it takes you to complete the level. For instance, all of the levels in Math UC are 30 lessons long until you get to Algebra 1. And there are concepts in Algebra 1 that needed to be parsed into smaller bites and smaller segments. So there's 35 lessons. So you may find that the traditional academic season of August to June is not long enough. Give your children the latitude to do it right. And that way they only have to do it once. If you set those expectations, just like that ship that has already set sail, you can adjust the rudders, trim the sails, and head in a different direction as you need to change. But if you don't, there will be challenges along the way. And if you don't anticipate them, then you start to panic. And that's not what we want to do as parents with our kids. Math UC has a traditional scope and sequence. It looks pre-algebra, algebra 1, geometry, algebra 2, pre-calc, and calculus. But you may want to take the approach to that sequence differently. And you have the latitude to do that. You know, one of the reasons that we homeschool is because we want something different for our children than what's in a public school environment. So consider, as you look at Math UC scope and sequence, what would give my child the best experience mathematically? Often we have parents say to us, well, where should I be? What grade should my child be in at what level of Math UC? And when you're a mastery focused curriculum, you are where you are, but that doesn't mean it has to take an entire year to go through a sequence of mathematics. Let me give you two examples from my own experience. My third child, who was the one who helped me find my way to Math UC, was a very traditional mathematics student. She used Math UC pre-algebra through algebra 2, went on to college, and today she's a research biologist. So I think we did all right with her. Her younger sister used Math UC pre-algebra through algebra 2 and did her college mathematics while still in high school. Now, let me say as an aside, if you have a child who has college aspirations, let me encourage you to reach out to the college where they're going to matriculate or where they think they want to matriculate and find out what the necessity is at that college for mathematics. I have a colleague whose son majored in computer science, and he did 2 years at a community college and got all of his mathematics requirements out of the way, or so he thought, until he transferred to a 4-year school, and then that 4-year school had different requirements. The most important thing, I think, is to understand that as parents, we want our kids to be successful in college. 15 years ago, I heard a report out of the state of Maryland that said that 53% of college freshmen had to take a remedial math class. That meant you paid college level dollars for a math class that would not count towards your child's transcript, but it was a requirement for them to be successful in college math. I think we're much better to lay a solid foundation now with our students than regret later the things that we have done. That goes back to my statement earlier about goal setting. If you know what your goals are, you can trim the sails and adjust the rudders and still continue to sail forward. As your child's plans change, as your child's aspirations change, you still have that goal set in the future and you know how to get there from here. As far as Sunlight is concerned, they have a link directly to Math UC's website. And here's where I'm going to recommend you pick up a phone and you take a picture of that URL, sunlight.mathuc.com. That will take you to our placement tool. Now, our placement tool starts all the way back with Can Your Child Count? Everyone begins the tool at that place. You're going to answer questions yes until you can't answer yes anymore. If you get to the end of the placement tool and you're not satisfied with the information, or you just want to have another conversation with someone, let me encourage you to contact Demme Learning. I've got our phone number on the screen. You can use option 1. You can also go to our website and you can use our chat feature. You can send us an email. As a Sunlight family, we are more than happy to help you with placement. We want to get it right the first time so that when you order materials, you have exactly what you need to be successful. So we'll help you in the placement process and then we'll return you to Sunlight to make your purchase. But let me also say as an aside that Demme Learning is a company that supports their product all the way through. We want you to have a joyful journey in your mathematical experiences or in any of the products that we sell. So if you have a challenge with a Demme Learning product, you have a question, you would like some assistance, pick up the phone and be in touch with us. We want you to be successful. Unlike some curriculum that once you've purchased it, it's yours and you can figure out from there how to make it work. Demme Learning really has a whole cadre of staff who were either homeschooled themselves or homeschooled their children or have worked alongside homeschoolers for eons. And we want you to be successful. So please don't hesitate to be in touch with us. Last but not least, you've got my contact information on the screen. If I've said something here that you feel like, geez, Gretchen, I'd really like to ask you some specific questions, you're most welcome to be in touch with me. As a parent now who is nearing the end of the academic journey with her children, let me give you just a couple of thoughts in closing. As you look back over your children's high school experiences, what you want to do is set them up for success as adults. And sometimes that means doing the hard stuff at home. Maybe you've got a child that you've allowed to not show any of their work. Now's the time to have that conversation with them about why showing work at the high school level is critical. Maybe you've had a child who struggled mathematically heretofore. Math, you see, can be a solution to that mathematical struggle. Find the gaps and fill them, reinflate the tires, if you will. We're more than happy to help you make that happen. Maybe you have a child who absolutely has no motivation and doesn't know what they want to do, but is not sure that they want to go on to college. Frankly, I was of the opinion when my eldest daughter was beginning to look at colleges that you were going to college regardless, because it was a ticket punch to a better life in adulthood. That was 20 years ago. And I have to tell you now that my opinion has changed. And my opinion is if you can't go to college debt-free, then maybe you should do something else. And frankly, trades in the US are suffering because we don't have enough kids going into them. So there may be virtue in you having a conversation about what it might be like to be a welder, a plumber, a draftsman. All of those things, whether you're a plumber, an electrician, a draftsman, all require mathematical skills. So giving your kids the best mathematical foundation possible is essential to their success. I want to thank you for joining me in the last half hour. It's been my very great pleasure to have a conversation with you. I wish you the joy of the journey. I wouldn't have traded my 21 years for anything. And I hope you find it to be the same. Thanks so much for spending time with me. And if we can do anything to help you on this journey, please don't hesitate to be in touch with us at Demme Learning.